The once hot momentum trade is losing steam and taking the rest of the market down with it. Josh Lipton's in San Francisco to break down the moves for us. Hey, Josh.
Melissa, let's start with some of those big tech names that help drive this market higher. Now, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google parent Alphabet have collectively lost about $1 trillion in market cap from their recent highs. Let's put that another way. That's what Apple was worth towards its peak not too long ago. Speaking of Apple, another tough day for bulls there. That stock down nearly 20% so far just this month. Goldman's Rod Hall slashed his price target to 182. That's down from 209 in part because he says sees weakness in demand for its products in China. Then there are the chips, which we know have been under pressure, though some of those chip names were in the green in today's trade. You take Nvidia, Citron Research, which had shorted Nvidia, as you guys well know, indicating it's now long. Applied Materials, Texas Instruments also higher, as well as Micron, despite the downgrade we saw there from Baird. Social media stocks, mixed bag, Twitter in the red, Snap just edging higher in today's trade. And so for those high-flying cloud names like Salesforce, Adobe, didn't do too much today, though. They did get whacked this week. Both, though, still up strongly so far in 2018. Guys, back to you.
All right, Josh, thanks. Let's trade it. Who do you think, which stock is over in terms of the momentum trade?
Well, I tell you what, I look at semis, and until we get any clarity on China, it's very difficult for me to see, both in terms of the cyclicality, the way businesses seem to be holding back on spending, and just the dynamics of trade. So jumping into the semis, essentially we've hit a double bottom here, somewhere around 88 on the SMH. I don't think this is the time to run back into that trade.
Are you in Intel still?
I am. And Intel's held up reasonably well, but Nvidia is one that really intrigues me.
Why do you hold on?
Because I believe in the story. I believe in what they're doing in terms of market share in different areas, data center and so forth. I think they're actually stealing some from Nvidia right now. But I still got to get a CEO one of these days. I mean, sooner or later, right? I mean, it seems like this has been a very long time. I think if they go in the right direction there, that will give the stock a little bit more of a boost to the upside as well.
You know, one name I think it's worth looking at, we were talking about Facebook for a bit last night. You know, I just don't know how Twitter does not have a difficult 2019. We were saying, how do you not extrapolate some of the issues that Facebook's having with what is going to be a huge push for bipartisan regulation? Look at that thing. That's kind of the triangle of death. Maybe Verrone can speak to that a little later here. But there were three things in that quarter when it gapped up last month that I thought were kind of troubling, although investors didn't seem to care. MAUs, they lost monthly active users, 9 million. They blamed European regulation, okay? And then we also had DAUs, daily active users, decelerated that growth, okay? And they also gave what I think is optimistic guidance for margins. I think for 2019, that's likely to come down. That one, if it breaks that neckline, I think you're going to see it in the mid-20s in 2019 early.
I think I saw a smirk at a Chris Verrone when you said triangle of death. We'll ask him about that
That's
later.
a technical term.
I mean, in your mind,
term.
it might be a technical term. All right. Chris here says that you should ditch momentum stocks. He's got two other stocks to buy amidst the carnage. So Chris Verrone, as we mentioned, of Strategas Research Partners at the Plasma to break it down. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Melissa. Yeah, so what we want to talk about is A, what we can own, and then B, what we think we can start to buy here. We'll start with what we can't buy. These are the cues, the well-defined uptrend over the last several years. We know we've broken that. We've now made a lower low underneath those October lows. And frankly, that rally failed right where it should have failed, at the 50-day moving average. So until the pattern of lower lows changes here, I think the burden of proof here is on the bears. And any bounces back to the 200-day moving average probably has to be sold. I think ultimately 170 is resistance here, and we're going to have a tough time doing much better than that. And if we pick apart some of the pieces and we look at what we really think has more downside here, I think PayPal is a great example. Now, this is a name that is sitting right on major support. This is $73. We think ultimately that has to fail. In corrections, there are no protected stocks. There are no sacred stocks. And ultimately, even the best ones get hit. We think there's more downside that we have to work through here. And I think the best of the best is Microsoft. And this one has to get hit harder as well, sitting right on the 200. We just don't think you can go through this corrective phase with Microsoft holding the 200. We think ultimately 85 or 90 might be the right price here. Not 101. So what can we buy on the other side? I'm going to talk about a couple here. This is an oil play on the other side. This is United Airlines, UAL, acting great in a tough tape, actually making new relative highs versus the S&P. So here's a leadership name starting to break out, doing it in relative terms. And I'll give you one more here in healthcare. I think Amgen is interesting. Another name making relative highs versus the S&P in a pretty tough tape. We're on the verge here of breaking out. So better looking stock, relative highs, Amgen, UAL improving. I think it's too early to call bottoms on PayPal or Softy.
All right, Chris, why don't you come on over? Stephanie will bring the chair in. Thank you, Steph.
We don't vote, just so we're clear as we head
There's
into
no voting
19.
anymore.
We don't
no voting
vote.
anymore.
That's it, right?
Dictatorship. When it comes to inviting people over to this. When it comes to inviting people over
Probably
to
it
that.
should be.
All right, so with the more downside on the NASDAQ, does that necessarily mean that there's more downside on the S&P 500 as well?
Yeah, and I don't know if it happens in the next 2 weeks, but I think we're probably looking at lower prices into the first quarter of 2019. I recognize seasonality is a tailwind here, and it's not out of the question you get some type
Chris,
of...
Pete's got a bug swirling around him.
there's something
He's
around
not
here,
looking
so
at you
sorry
funny.
that's
Got me.
Yeah,
Anyway,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Goes for the two good looking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Listen, I think ultimately lower prices at some point. There's certainly a seasonal tailwind. You could get a bounce. But what I think stood out to me about today is there was more calls bought on the S&P than puts. That's not real fear. All right? Good lows are accompanied with cathartic moments, right? Panic, anxiety. That wasn't present today. The trend reading today was like 1.4. You want that above 2 or 3. So I think there's probably more work to do on the downside. The question is it in the next 2 weeks or is it in the first quarter? My gut would be probably the first quarter of 2019.
Is there such a thing as a bottom that is made gradually, as we're seeing? Because there's I talked to a lot of strategists during the day on Power Lunch, and some of them seem to believe that that can happen, that there doesn't have to be this big moment of fear or capitulation, that this can happen over time.
We've looked at lows back to the 1940s. I can't find a good one where there's not a cathartic, fearful moment.
Back to the 1940s.
Now,
all right.
what we see is there's often a bang, right? A high volume, high drama day that's followed by a whimper, a lower volume, less dramatic, even an undercut of the low. Have we had the bang yet in this moment? I'm not convinced that we have seen that moment just yet.
Chris, so Pete was talking earlier about rotations. Throughout this year, we've seen a lot of rotations, but a big churn year. Are there groups? Let's just say that the mega cap tech is not going to be the leadership if we do bottom. Is there a couple of groups of stocks that can do that, can take the place of mega cap tech?
Well, I think this is an important question. If we're going to come out of this with a durable advance, rotation isn't going to be good enough. We're going to get new money into this market. We're going to need to see evidence of stocks actually being accumulated. I don't think we've seen a lot of evidence of that in the last 12 months. And we talk about this rotation game. Surely, if there's all this rotation, there must be a rotation winner somewhere. And I don't know of any rotation winners, right? I don't know who's selling tech at the right moment to buy healthcare at the right moment. So I think ultimately real money has to come in, and we haven't seen that in 12 months.
To answer your question, not that Chris didn't answer your question, I happen to think that
triangle of death.
tops are processes and bottoms are events.
Right.
And I'll give you an event. And Pete was about to say this, not that I'm speaking for Pete, but he was going to mention Nvidia. And we talked about it last night. And we said, if you happen to see a day where it goes down to 138 or so on big volume and reverses, that's your day. That's exactly what happened today. It traded 3 times normal volume, traded down to that 135 level that we had talked about while I was in the car on Thursday, while our governor was playing cribbage in the storm, if you recall. And that's exactly what happened. So that was an event.
What is cribbage?
Some old-timey
really
game
sure,
or something.
but it sounds good.
But on the topic of reversals, we've seen sort of that. Well, I don't know. I didn't look at the volume on Facebook or Amazon, but intraday we did see Facebook finish in the green, and it did reverse. Are these positive signs?
Yeah, I think there's been enough damage done in a lot of these stocks where a bottom isn't a one-day event. I think this takes months and months and months of repair, not different from what we saw in 2015, 2016, 2011, 2012. These things take time. It's not a singular event.
And just quickly, Chris, is there such a thing as the triangle of death?
It's the first I've heard of it.
Well, when you're flying over Bermuda, apparently that's a difficult thing. But
it's okay. It works for whatever works for you, right?
look, he's coining phrases right and left over here. Give him some credit. Some are going to be good.
It sounds, guys, this is my time to shine. We're going to segue into something here.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Wow.